Welcome back for part 3 of this series where we are talking about business credit scores, how to build them, and who these business credit bureaus are. In today's video, part 3 of this series, we are going to be talking about none only than Dun and Bradstreet. This is one of the most popular and most heard of business credit bureaus out there. So I'm going to be diving into, are they going to be the right business bureau for you to build credit with, or are you just going to be wasting your time and money with Dun and Bradstreet? So we're going to be diving into it, guys. So make sure that you stick around for this entire video. Let's get started. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is Credit Coach Nicole Scott. If you are new here, make sure that you have subscribed to the channel and give me a huge thumbs up if you found value in this video. If you are looking for more help, whether it's personal credit, credit repair, or business credit, make sure to visit the links below, join the credit community, and you can book a call with me one-on-one or sign up for some of my coaching packages. Now, let's get started into the good stuff here. If you are interested in building business credit, Dun & Bradstreet is the #1 business bureau that most people have heard of. Now, the Paydex score is what Dun & Bradstreet is known for. So there are two numbers with Dun & Bradstreet. There's going to be your DUNS number, and that's basically your file ID number. And then there's going to be the Paydex score. The Paydex score is going to be your business credit score with Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet is the biggest credit bureau on the business side that collects and analyzes business trade references accounts. So you can tell I am not a huge fan of vendor trade accounts, guys. I am more of a financial type of gal. So if you are a business that can utilize vendor accounts and supplier accounts, meaning you get a lot of supplies or, materials, right? Then you would probably really benefit from building up a solid vendor account on your business credit reports. But if you are a business like me who really is looking for cash credit lines, then vendor accounts aren't going to be necessarily what we want. So Dun & Bradstreet is by far the #1 vendor information bureau, right? They specialize in vendor accounts, which are net 30 accounts, net 60 accounts, and net 90 accounts. And basically what that means is once a vendor or a supplier or a service provider bills you for the product, service, whatever, you would have 30 days to pay that invoice, right? And if you pay beyond the terms, that would be considered a late payment for your business, which is just detrimental to your business. So please don't pay beyond the terms. Don't even try to pay 1 day beyond the terms. You must pay on the due date, by the due date, or a few days before the due date. So please understand that if you do pay your bills late, it will negatively impact you on the business side. And that's the most damaging because business credit is really built on on-time payments, okay? And there is no cushion, unlike the personal side. And I've said this many times, but if you don't remember anything, remember this. You have to pay all of your business credit references on time or as agreed because you do not want them to report that you paid beyond the terms, okay? Now, these records that Dun & Bradstreet gets can include on-time and early payments and overdue debts and bills that have been sent to collections. Now, say for example, you open up a 𝗥𝗲𝗋 account or a, Granger account, or if you wanted Verizon, these are all places that are going to be using Dun & Bradstreet because again, vendor products, supplies, suppliers, service providers, a lot of utility companies, a lot of leasing companies. If you're looking to rent an event space or any sort of commercial space, generally they're going to be looking at Dun & Bradstreet. You can also purchase commercial vehicles using Dun & Bradstreet if you build up your credit profile strong enough. Now, the Paydex score is kind of like a dollar-weighted indicator that reflects the business's past payment references. So what that means is a company is going to receive a credit score on their business scoring system between 1 and 100, okay? And the higher that number is, the better off you are. So the average is an 80 Paydex score, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard that, and you might be wondering, well, how do I get to a 90? How do I get to 100? Basically, if you have 3 to 5 vendors that have reported early payments, you'll get a 90 or 100 Paydex. Is it necessary? Absolutely not, because really you don't want to pay too early. You want to be in that sweet spot where you are paying about 3 to 5 days, business days, prior to your due date. And mind you, if the date that your account is due falls on a weekend or a holiday, you need to make sure that you are calculating business days. So you need to make sure that your bill is paid 3 to 5 business days prior, so that way there is enough time to process that payment and make sure that payment is applied to your account on time, so they will report an on-time payment. That is the most important thing that we're looking for on the business side, is those on-time payments to the business bureaus. If you can show a solid payment history, then in a lot of vendor and supplier eyes, you are not a risk. People that make payments late, people that miss payments are a risk. So therefore, vendors are not going to extend credit terms to them. So it's very important that as a business, as a person, as a consumer, we get in the habit of paying all of our credit obligations on time. Set up auto pay, make sure the minimum amount due is being taken out. By far the most important thing, especially when it comes to Dun & Bradstreet, because Dun & Bradstreet's Paydex score is solely built, the majority of this score is built on payment history. Okay, your ability to repay back debt obligation as agreed. It might sound simple, but you would be surprised the amount of people that mess it up. So that's the thing that a lot of people do, is they'll pay a few days late, and then guess what? That vendor is reporting paid beyond the terms. We cannot have that, because Dun & Bradstreet is a stickler for on-time payments, okay? The Paydex score is used primarily by vendors and suppliers to judge a company's, factor of whether or not they should extend credit terms based on their payment history. So credit terms are going to be your net 30s, your net 60s, your net 90s. Typically, the better your credit score is with Dun & Bradstreet, like you want to have an 80 or above. You don't want to have anything less than an 80, okay? So if you have an 80, you're low risk, and that's great. You don't want to come across as a risk, because that's how vendors and suppliers are going to view your credit. They don't care about anything else. They just care about what's on that report. I have had some really generous terms extended to me, but with vendor accounts, I wasn't really able to leverage it for my type of business. For my type of business, I really needed financial trade lines, and unfortunately, I just really wasn't educated when I first started building business credit. So that's why it's so important for you to spend the time and educate yourself on the differences between financial trade lines and vendor trade lines. And I covered that in part 2 or part 1 of the video. I can't remember now, but that's why it's so important to watch all of the different parts of this series where we talk about the business credit bureaus and scores. So with your Paydex score, it is important if you are seeking vendor terms or vendor financing, because a lot of vendors, suppliers like Verizon, like so many people, Shell Small Business, they're going to look at your Dun & Bradstreet, and they are looking at your ability to repay back debt as agreed. So you having more time to pay your bills may improve your company's cash flow. So let's just be honest, not everyone wants to pay for everything up front. That's why credit is so powerful. So if you can show your ability to pay back debt as agreed, you can even go to some vendors, smaller vendors or larger vendors, and see if we willing to extend net 60 or net 90 terms based on how your suppliers or clients pay you back, because you just want to build that relationship with them. Things are a little bit more flexible on the vendor side versus with banks and financial institutions. So you'll notice here, there's not a whole lot of financial institutions and banks included in this whole thing. A lot of banks and financial institutions don't use Dun & Bradstreet. Now, mind you, there are still some out there that do use Dun & Bradstreet. So if your business credit has been shown to be strong enough for your business to stand on its own 2 feet, then that's where they can look past a personal guarantee, use your business credit, and use your cash flow to qualify your business for funding. Now, Dun & Bradstreet may consider trade references from up to 875 individual vendors when determining your company's Paydex score, and your company will need about 3 vendor accounts reported in order to generate that 80 Paydex score. And mind you, all 3 of those vendor accounts are going to need to report paid as agreed. If you get paid before terms or paid early, you could get a 90 Paydex score, but again, you don't want to pay too early. So you can also have the option with Dun & Bradstreet of adding your own trade lines. But this is a high risk option because of the fact that not every vendor is able to be added. And the way that that whole program works is if you did business with, say, if you are in construction and you buy materials from a local business and you have a 90 account with them, but that trade line and that trade reference is not being reported to Dun & Bradstreet. Well, since that's a vendor account, you can actually purchase the Dun & Bradstreet package where you can add your own trade references and have them verified by Dun & Bradstreet. However, that business must be registered with Dun & Bradstreet. They don't need to necessarily have a Paydex score, but they do need to have a DUNS number and be registered as a business with Dun & Bradstreet, and you can manually submit that trade reference to Dun & Bradstreet for them to verify it, and then that will be on your business credit. Because the more accounts that you can have on your business credit report that show your ability to repay back your contracts as agreed, repay back everything as agreed, that is great because you are building a solid business credit profile. Just like on the personal side, you want to have at least 10 to 20 positive credit trade lines. And that goes for both sides. The personal side, if you want a strong personal credit, 10 to 20 trade lines. Business credit, 10 to 20 trade lines. We also provide trade lines for the business and the personal. If you are interested in purchasing trade lines, I've left a link below for you in the description for you to check it out. You can also book a call with me to see if you would be a good candidate for trade lines. Now, let's talk about some things that are high risk. Now, if you have 0 to 49 with Dun & Bradstreet, you are high risk. That means that you have late payments, okay? Now, if you have made some of your payments on time, but there are a few late payments, then you could potentially have anywhere from a 50 to a 79 score with Dun & Bradstreet. But you don't want that. Believe me when I tell you, you getting late payments corrected with the business side is like darn near impossible, okay? So that's why you want to be responsible. You don't want to take on more than you can actually financially handle, because you have to understand this is a commitment that you are going to have for X amount of time, right? Or if you buy supplies, you need to know, hey, I need to be able to pay this back, because it's not like a revolving account where you can just pay the minimum amount due. That's why it's so important for you to understand your terms with each of your credit accounts. A lot of people don't quite understand the terms with some of these business credit cards that they get and realize, hey, this is a charge card. This is not a credit card. And a charge card is just like a net 30 account. You got to pay it all within 30 days. There's no minimum. The minimum is whatever you spent, and we're going to take it right out your bank account. Okay. So here's the breakdown of your credit score with Dun & Bradstreet, kind of like a bird's eye view over it. And like I said, stay away from becoming late. Please, please, please. Because once you come late, it's like, you might as well just chalk that whole thing up and start another business. And that's why I tell people, start other businesses when you don't need them, so you can start your own shelf corporations and use them for funding in the future. We all make mistakes, but it's important for us to learn from these mistakes so we don't make the same mistake twice. Because what's the definition of doing the same thing over and over and over and realizing you're going to get the same negative result over and over and over? It's what? Does anyone know? Yeah, insanity. Okay, so don't do that. Don't make the same mistake twice. Okay, now we're going to wrap this up for Dun & Bradstreet. So basically, to sum it all up for you guys for Dun & Bradstreet, if you are a company that needs vendor accounts, supplier accounts, or even, you can get an auto loan, Ally Financial uses Dun & Bradstreet. They could also use Experian. So you're going to need comparable credit, because there are two different types of trade lines that report to Dun & Bradstreet. There's the vendor accounts, but financial accounts also get reported to Dun & Bradstreet. So say, for example, you have a lease with a company that doesn't report to your business credit with Dun & Bradstreet. Again, you can add that manually as a trade line if you purchase the package to do so. I believe that package, you can add like 10 trade lines or whatever. But again, they all have to be registered with Dun & Bradstreet with a DUNS number, and they would have to validate that business trade reference, and you can have that added to your business credit profile. So you can ensure that you're getting credit for all of your obligations that you're paying on time. So do you need Dun & Bradstreet? Yes, you do. And it is important to have a Paydex score of at least 80, but you don't necessarily need to invest a lot in it, especially if your business has good cash flow or if you have good personal credit, because not a lot of actual banks or financial institutions are going to use Dun & Bradstreet to approve you solely. If a bank does use Dun & Bradstreet, the chances of them using that in addition to something else is going to be very likely. Like I said before, you're going to need one of those 3 C's, whether it's cash flow, collateral, or credit. So if you guys haven't checked out my credit store merch, I have a cash flow, credit flow shirt. It's super dope. I've got a lot of cool designs in my new credit merch shop. So check it out at Credit Repair Merch or creditscoremerch.com. I've left the links below in the description so you guys can get some merchandise and represent your credit scores. Unfortunately, nothing for the business side yet, but if you haven't learned anything yet, you have to know it all starts with the personal credit. The personal credit is the foundation that you lay, and then you apply the same concepts to your business, making those on-time payments, building up positive trade lines, getting a nice credit mixture, because you do need a few vendor accounts if you intend to have supplier and vendor accounts and, utility accounts and operate with how some businesses do, right? But if you feel like you won't really need a lot of vendor accounts, you won't really need Dun & Bradstreet for much, it's still, a good thing to get some trade references that do report and get that profile set up. Sign up for a free account with DUNS. And honestly, the easiest way to get your DUNS profile these days is to get a business trade line that reports to Dun & Bradstreet. And you can sign up for NAV. They no longer give you your DUNS number, but from what I understand, they still report your business trade line to Dun & Bradstreet. So a lot of places, including NAV, they are no longer giving that score because a lot of banks and financial institutions, what is, generally what a lot of people prefer, they don't use Dun & Bradstreet. City National does use Dun & Bradstreet, and they would be one of the only banks that I know that actually use Dun & Bradstreet to approve business credit. A lot of the other banks are using Experian or Equifax, sometimes even PayNet. Ally Financial, that's another one. They can do the auto loans, but again, you're going to need to have comparable credit. So, build up, guys. And if you need additional support, you can always book a call with me. But until next time, guys, I appreciate you so much for watching. And if you do know of any other banks or financial, funding companies or financial resources that could approve people just using Dun & Bradstreet or using a combination of Dun & Bradstreet plus, drop it in the links below. There's also the Sam's Club. So the more I think about it, there are, a lot of options out there. But as far as like real banks, a lot of them are just simply not using Dun & Bradstreet. But definitely let me know if you have any experience with, some small, tiny banks. And again, I've called off Sam's Club. I've called off City National. I've called off, like Divvy and a lot of these like charge cards. We're not worried about those ones. We want to know about real funding companies, real financial banks and institutions that will fund you based on Dun & Bradstreet only. Always, right? Not too many left, but nonetheless, guys, it is still important to get that going. And I appreciate you watching so much. Take care.